What was your favorite part about filming the episode in Wyoming?
My favorite part of filming our Wyoming episode was definitely just talking to the different interviewees and hearing their different perspectives in such a small and such a conservative state.
And their tagline is the equality state. And they say that they're like live and let live. A lot of interviewees will mention that. So it was interesting to learn about that dynamic because I felt like it was very unique from the other places that we had been before that.
I'm Sara Burlingame, and I'm the executive director of Wyoming Equality. I mean, I'm glad you guys are doing the documentary because, you know, I travel all over Wyoming and I'm constantly hearing surprising things and like new things. Like I was up in Casper and this lesbian couple who had run something called the Casper Closet Library from like before the internet. And they had all these sort of archives and they were like, oh, do you want them? I was like, give them to me. And then just somebody who happened to be standing there was like, oh, are you interested in that kind of thing, Sarah? And ended up telling me about a Catholic priest who founded a Dignity chapter here in the 1970s and would invite the bishop and all the other priests to come to this LGBTQ affirming space. He would march in Denver Pride in a big Wyoming Dignity banner in the 1970s. So we keep retelling the history of Wyoming as though we were like this very white, very straight place, but it's never true. Like, it's just not true. Like, you know, obviously, you know, we were home to at least 23 tribes before white people were ever here. So Two-Spirit, Wyoming has existed before any of us got here.
So Two-Spirit is defined as having both the masculine and feminine spirit. You have the both identities, and Two-Spirit is kind of seen as a more cultural type of perspective. It's important to remember that not every tribal person refers to themselves as Two-Spirit. They can refer to themselves as their traditional names. When it comes to the term Two-Spirit, you know, the fear of many Two-Spirit elders and Two-Spirit activists is that like Halloween or like certain elements of our cultural and spirituality, that it's going to be appropriated and used in a way that is not indigenous. And so we really have to, in a respectful way, say that Two-Spirit is a term that is reserved for indigenous people only. You know, Two-Spirit people were seen as people that were revered and had traditional, had spiritual roles and had traditional leadership roles. They were seen as doctors, they were seen as healers, they were revered in tribal communities. But with Christianity and the influence of colonialism, it took a lot of that respect away. It's hard because you're in a state that has that history in Matthew Shepard, but yet really has no hate crime bill or legislation on the books that would prevent people like myself from being protected if we were to ever be harmed.
So I moved here in August of 98, and Matthew's body was found in October of 98.
And Matthew Shepard was beaten last weekend, tied to a wooden fence by two men who met Shepard in a bar in Laramie, Wyoming.
And so the reality of his murder, but more like the reality of how the state handled it or didn't handle it, has really shaped all of my time in Wyoming. And the thing that we always say at Wyoming Equality is, you know, Matthew's murder could have happened in any state, and it happened here. The shadow of Matthew's murder, it looms really large, not just because he was so violently murdered, but because our state didn't have any tools to walk towards it and sort of say, what does this mean about us, and process it. And instead, I think we were so shocked by being in the national spotlight and the international spotlight and being told you were these uniquely horrible people, you know, these monsters. And I think we just felt really defensive about that. I get real punchy. Like, I get really punchy when people don't understand us and they come in with an assumption, you know, of who we are. And I should be better than this, right? Like, I should be perhaps like have more humility or sort of like, oh, let me helpfully explain you. But I get really like, my country's in my knuckles. Like absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to take it from someone who hasn't done what we've done. I mean, we're the most conservative state in the country by like all metrics, right? Like, our legislature has a super majority of Republicans. Our top 5 elected are all Republican. In 2016, we tied with West Virginia as the state who went the most overwhelmingly for then President Trump. In 2020, we were number 1, right? Like, we are the most conservative state in the country. And every single year, anti-LGBTQ bills are brought in Wyoming, and we have defeated every single one since 1977. So, like, I'm not taking it from California. I'm not taking it from Michigan. I'm not taking it from New York. Like, this, oh, you know, like, your state passed those bills. Your state passed Prop 8. That would have died in Wyoming. So, like, they don't understand us. And we get a lot wrong. We get a lot really, really wrong. But if you don't have any curiosity about us or you don't understand what we get right, then I think I feel less generous about that perspective. It's really hard being an advocate who, like, our office, our organization, we are trying really hard to push away from really easy binaries, right? Like, we don't like binaries in sexuality. We don't think they exist. We think they're made up. We don't think they exist politically either.
Hi, I'm Dan Zwonitzer. I'm the representative for House District 43, which is Eastern Cheyenne and South Central Laramie County. Kind of proud to be a 5th generation, raising the 6th generation of Wyomingites in this county, and we still have the historic ranch that my great-great-grandparents had. I was basically closeted for my first 4 terms, and so came out finally in 2013 with my then boyfriend, now husband. And so we've been together almost 10 years now, but have been going to legislative events and been pretty open about my relationship really since 2014. So this is the Senate chamber, original paint colors as well. Even though I've been in the House for the past 18 years, this room holds special significance to me because it was actually my first kiss with my husband. Right about here. On our second date, I had given him a tour of the Capitol, and we ended right about there. So every time I walk in this room, I kind of think about that kiss. It was that good. You know, I think it was my second term in 2007 when I told my parents. And actually, my father was a legislator for a decade as well. And so there was some pressure just being in Cheyenne, Wyoming, you know, the Brokeback Mountain State, the Matthew Shepard State, that I didn't feel the need to come out, especially as a Republican. And my father being the legislature, and both in this town, I had part of the town, he had the other part of town. So it wasn't really till I found the one, my now husband, that I said, hey, I'm pretty successful, I'm comfortable with who I am. I was in my 4th term in the legislature at that point. People knew me and felt that was a good time to bring my now spouse to a legislative event and started introducing him around. And it was quite a memorable evening, we'll put it that way. You know, I think the fascinating thing about Wyoming when it comes to LGBT issues is everyone knowing, you know, about Matthew Shepard and that being such a nationwide event that cast a negative shadow on Wyoming. We've been really hesitant to be anti-LGBT in anything. We've had some anti-trans bills the past 5 or 6 years in Wyoming, which have gone nowhere quickly. Bathroom bills, those type of things weren't even heard on the floor. They were squashed. But it was interesting this year to have it was called the Fairness in Women's Sports Act.
I think actually a reporter called me and said that someone had already submitted, you know, well in advance of the session, an anti-trans sports bill. And then they told me who the sponsor was. And I don't remember being that shocked as I was when I saw that it was my friend Wendy. So Senate File 51, it's called like the Women's Sports Freedom Act or something. It's hard for me to like even remember the title because it's such hot nonsense. It was introduced in this last legislative session, and it was a bill in search of a problem because it didn't exist. It was a bill that said, hey, there should be a rule that says that no trans girls and girls only in K through 12 education can participate in any sport or activity unless it aligns with the gender that they were assigned at birth. And one of the very first things that, the reporter asked Senator Schuler was, were you aware that the Wyoming High School Activities Association already has a rule that deals with this? And she wasn't. And Utah borrowed Wyoming's language from the Wyoming High School Activities Association, and it has been adapting theirs to align with ours, which is a very common sense, very local control solution to saying, hey, the answer is not going to be always. There will be some times when it won't be appropriate. And that makes some people on the left really mad. But the answer is also not going to be never. There are some times when this is perfectly appropriate and we care about the needs of the student, and how the student determines their gender is not exclusive from participating in sports or activities, which help create good sportsmanship and learn about being part of a team and all the things that we say we value in Wyoming. So the answer is not going to be never either. And that's a very Wyoming solution. And it's done. It's been working great. So this bill kind of tried to upend all that. I think there's probably different versions of how this didn't get passed. I think a lot of it was that, Wyoming Equality never follows sort of the traditional playbook, right? Like, we just brought in families. We brought in Santi, who was a student at the University of Wyoming and transitioned while a student athlete.
I remember Sara had let me know what was going on. And after I'd gotten off the phone with her, I sat there and I kind of laughed because not that it's funny, right? But it's just, I'm like, we're still having this conversation, and it just was really disheartening also, hearing about all the news with Don't Say Gay in Florida. And I'm like, I didn't think that Wyoming was going to reach that level. My name is Santi Murillo. I am a restaurant manager and special events coordinator, and I'm also a cheerleading coach. So cheered all through high school. All through high school, I was a Wyoming All-State cheerleader and an NCAA All-American. I tried out for University of Wyoming cheer squad, and I made it. I did it all 4 years, and it was amazing. And then I've been really lucky and blessed to be able to be a coach for the past 3 years. It started, I will say, probably 2016. That's when I really started to question who I was and what I wanted to do. I remember I got really into RuPaul's Drag Race. So I was like, okay, maybe drag is the avenue I want to go. And then I tried it, and the more I tried it, I was like, this isn't for me. It's not, And then I was like, still so confused. I realized slowly, it was like, okay, well, the feminine clothing and the makeup, I was like, it feels right, So day to day, I would just do that. And, I'd always get the questions, well, what do I call you? And I always just said, just call me Santi, that's always been my name. I was like, you can call me whatever you want. Just respect what I'm doing. And then in 2017, I was getting ready to cheer a basketball game. And I remember just putting on the boys' uniform, and I broke down. I had a moment where I went to my coach and I just told him, I said, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel like me. And I still really didn't have the words to put into what I was feeling or how I was feeling. But he was very amazing. He was awesome. He recommended me to go to counseling. And then I did. And then through that, I really realized, all right, this is what it means. And that's where my transition started, really. I remember hearing Senator Schuler speak on the issue and just the vocabulary that she used. And it just all seemed so outdated. And it was, the best word I have for it is ignorant, right? It was a lack of knowing really anything about the queer community, and especially trans people. But I remember Sara invited me to share my story at the Capitol, and I did. I was more than happy to. So Senator Schuler really tried to drive home the point that she didn't want big, burly men in women's sports. And I very happily was like, I am 5'4" and I weigh 110 pounds. This is how I was born. It's the body I was given, and here we are. And she almost like disregarded that. It's just agitating that the conversation comes back to trans women being villains.
Procedurally, right, what happened was, hundreds and hundreds of bills get thrown into the hopper, and they can't all come out. And there's an obligation for them to come, on schedule. And Senator Schuler's bill, SF-51, an abortion bill and another one, they got pushed back and pushed back. And so they did make it out of the Senate, but they made it out of the Senate by changing the rules. And the Speaker of the House had been very clear. And he was like, we'll see all of the bills that you give us as long as you get them in on time. And that didn't happen. And so there was tremendous pressure on him. There was tremendous pressure on Speaker Barlow, right? He had said, I won't see these. But when every Republican in the state, when the state GOP, this has never happened before, to my knowledge, they passed a resolution at the state central party. And the resolution said every single Republican has to be a co-sponsor of an anti-transports bill. Like, that's a lot of pressure. And the Speaker of the House, he took that pressure and he didn't cave. The golden rule in Wyoming is do unto others in a snow ditch as you would have them do unto you in a snow ditch. And we think that there isn't room, when a snowplow's not coming for you, they're not coming. It is your neighbor or it is no one. And so you either build a culture where it's really important that their politics line up with yours, or you know who they sleep with and you care, or you decide that that's not going to be a factor. And for the most part, we've decided that. And all of that is at risk right now. All of that is under pressure in a way that you would have to be really naive to ignore.
We all just want to fit in. We want to feel accepted. And if our heart's in something, like a sport, we just want to feel included.
These transports bills are just a way to attack the trans community. It's a way to, and a lot of it is out of mass hysteria. A lot of it is out of fear and paranoia. It would harm a two-spirit young youth.
So I'm trying to think of what I would say to my younger self. And I think the best piece of advice I would have would be, it's okay. It's totally fine. You're not alone. And just be you. Because that's all, you're the only you, and that's your superpower. That is your superpower. There's nobody else like you. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much for joining us for our Wyoming episode.
We'll see you next time in Kansas City.